single baby born in Britain is going to have their DNA mapped under an NHS revolution to predict and prevent disease. Health Secretary Wes Streeting says it'll help people leapfrog deadly illnesses and bring in a new era of personalised medicine. Within the next decade, every newborn child baby will undergo full genomic sequencing, predicting their risk of hundreds of diseases before they can even crawl. To discuss this, I'm really pleased to welcome the former NHS Trust CEO, Dr Peter Carter, OBE. Welcome, Peter.
Good evening.
Hello. This is really interesting. I'm a doctor, I'm a practicing GP, and obviously I deal with long-term diseases all of the time. And when I opened the newspapers this morning and saw these headlines, which you could almost say were kind of saying that disease will be gone, I think it's a bit of a con, to be honest with you. I think we're firstly selling someone a bit of a dream that this can predict all disease and get rid of it. And it's also taking responsibility off of people who have a big input into their lifetime risk of disease. How do you see this working?
Well, first of all, I agree with you that, we get these announcements every now and then that's going to be a panacea to cure all ills, and this rarely happens. However, I do think there's a lot of merit in this. I think there are some major issues that we have to discuss, but doing this genomic testing, helping people to understand what their chances are of getting a range of illnesses and conditions, overall I see as a good thing. As you will know, currently babies after 5 days, parents are offered a test to identify the likelihood of 9 very rare diseases, things like cystic fibrosis and sickle cell anemia, and most people take advantage of that. So I don't see this as a wonder initiative that's going to cure everything, but I think it'll help. But if I can go on to say, I do think that there are concerns. There's about privacy, there's about security of data, and also there's the emotional factor associated with this. I mean, your panelists will know there are quite a number of people that have done their own DNA testing and have found out some uncomfortable things, like they may not be related to their father or whatever. So these things have got their consequences, but I still think that overall it's a good thing to do.
OK, I hear you, and obviously as a doctor I think there are some good aspects of this, but I do worry. I worry because the ethics, actually, of finding diseases which have no cure, and parents then having to tell a baby who couldn't consent to this, of course, this is done with parents' consent, that they might have an untreatable disease, could completely change the way that they and the parents approach the life of that child.
Yeah, but equally, if you've got a method of being able to identify that someone has a high likelihood of a condition, some people would, I wish to know that. I mean, one of the most high-profile cases in the last few, or examples in the last few years, has been Angelina Jolie, who undertook a test in 2013, and she had that mutated gene, and that meant she would have a very high likelihood of breast cancer or ovarian cancer, and she didn't have cancer, but she had a double mastectomy, and she's not the only woman that's done that. But I completely agree with you. It's not without its difficulties. And the other thing that we want to see is, we want to see the detail behind this. Is it compulsory? I mean, I can't see how you can compel people to do this. So, first of all, people have to give their consent. And we also want to make sure that these tests are accurate, because the nightmare scenario is that someone's told that they've got a likelihood of a condition, and then later on downstream, it turns out that they haven't got that.
I agree. And I think there's also, I heard this morning when I was listening to the radio about this, people saying, well, in the future, we won't need to screen the whole population because we'll be able to identify who's at risk. That is a complete nonsense, because you and I know that there are many things in lifestyle, lifestyle, which contribute to cancer. So women, for example, who have the BRCA gene make up a very small amount of women with breast cancer, just 2%. But alcohol, as I drink my glass of wine here, being obese, lack of exercise, increase my risk dramatically. So it's what I do to myself in life, not what genes I'm born with. So I do need to be screened regularly because we don't control people's lifestyle.
Look, I agree. I mean, I and many others have been talking about this for years. I don't know how aware your panelists are, but 50% of the health burden currently is lifestyle induced. It's not as a result of having conditions that were unavoidable. So 50% of the people this evening, as we're talking, 50% of the people in hospital are there because of obesity, alcohol, smoking, sedentary lifestyle. I could go on. And one of the things I would like to see is a much more proactive approach of helping people to understand the consequences of their diet, the consequences of their lack of exercise. The amount of money it's placed on the health burden is colossal. You know, in 1948, when the health service came into being, if someone had said, hey, listen, 60, 70 years on, heart transplants, kidney transplants, treatments for a whole range of cancers. You know, I could go on and give many, many examples again. And people say, hey, we're going to be all really healthy. Well, we have had all those issues, but what we've done is we've lost the health gain because of the way people live.
I agree. And do you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to bring in my panellist here, Trey, because he is the father of a newborn, and I'm sure he has a view on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Peter. So I'm just curious, right? I'm a bit sceptical when it comes to the ability of government to safeguard our data. And I just wonder if you have any concerns about the data potentially falling into the hands of, say, health insurance companies. So someone like my son might have some sort of DNA issue somewhere, and suddenly these health insurance companies start to use it to discriminate against certain people based on these findings in their genome.
Yeah, I do. I do have concerns. And, you know, we've seen all sorts of leaks. I think it was just last year, a company it's called 23andMe were fined £2.3 million. Because of their lack of ability to be able to withstand a cyber attack. And we don't want this getting into the wrong hands. So with what Wes Streeting has announced, what we need is a very strong, robust ethical framework, but we also need to make sure the firewalls are in there and all of the safeguards, because I don't want my data being leaked to people, and I'm sure you, with your newborn baby, that's the last thing that you would wish.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you rightly said that the heel prick test at birth checks for 9 diseases, and I have a 6-year-old, she had that heel prick, but that checks for diseases, all of which have a treatment. And I think that's key, because we don't want a baby without a thyroid or hypothyroid, because that would be damaging to them long term, to their brain. But testing the whole genome will raise all sorts of questions about untreatable diseases.
Look, I agree, and that's the balance. It's the balance as well. Is it better not to know, or is it better to know? Right now, I'm either better to know, but all of those ethical considerations have to be woven into this. And I'm afraid the track record, not just of this government, of successive governments, is they've not exactly covered themselves in glory with being able to protect our data and to be able to handle the sorts of things which are giving rise for concern. But I still say, on balance, I think it's a good thing to do.
But that's a really interesting answer to end on, Peter, and one that we can think about. Thank you so much for your time this evening. So that was the former NHS CEO, Dr. Peter Carber, OBE. Didn't he throw up some interesting questions about that?